We have a guest on. Let me go ahead and make sure that things are set up.
What's up?
So, I'm getting things set up to where people can see you. Give me just a second.
Gonna happen. Something is so weird with my audio. Sorry, give me 1 second here.
Gotcha.
It's just not. Oh, you know what it might be. Here.
You know what? Wait a minute. Can I just do this the easy way?
Oh, there we go. No, I got it. Don't plug into my headphone jack, I guess. Plug directly into my speaker jack. That's how I hear audio.
There
Don't
we
know
go.
why that works.
There we go.
Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yep, I can hear you just fine, and I realized what I needed to do to basically fix this so I'd be able to show you just fine here. Anyway, first of all, hey, Gaming World GWTV, have you considered jumping in a blender? Get off my channel. Anyway, sorry, we get the trolls that come in and go like, hey, do you want to buy cheap viewers here? Like, no. 1, that's a TOS violation. People. 2, that doesn't help me. 3, die.
Yeah, it does nothing. That's the thing. Like, botting literally, like, immediately when you start like any kind of channel, everyone's like, botting is terrible. And then when you start making content, you realize how the algorithm like picks you up, and you're like, oh yeah, botting would absolutely ruin any chance I have.
And like if you did get ahead by botting, if that was a way that you could get ahead, the minute that an update happened that retroactively removed the botted views, your channel would tank, because we've seen that on YouTube a lot of times where people are having like subscriber losses, and they're having like they delete a video, for instance, and suddenly the algorithm sees that they have 10,000 less views, and suddenly it hits them for it. Like, we know all the reasons it's bad for us. Maybe we shouldn't fucking do it.
Yeah, but people like watching the numbers go up. Like, it's just a pure dopamine thing, but it's like, I get it to a certain extent, you know?
I mean, I can get it from the numbers thing. I do play Magic and World of Warcraft. I get it. I understand big number go burr. I also understand that, like, anybody who's done this long enough or has done this as a job can have the exact same opinion of nobody cares. Like, I've never had another YouTuber ask me how many subscribers I have, and that should be the quickest determining factor of how little it matters. Yeah. Nobody who's actually in that industry cares. That said,
no, and it's crazy when you find those like 10 million subscriber people and their new video gets like 10,000 views. Yeah. And it's like mind blowing, where it's like, how did you, but it's just their fans aged up. They just, stopped watching them. They didn't change their content. Yeah. Whatever happened.
Shit happens. Like, I know I'm at 65,000 right now, and most of my videos will bounce between like 2,000 and 5,000, and those are the numbers that I've had for the past several years, despite the subscriber count going up. So it's just been, the revolving door of people aging out of content or getting tired of content, and then new people come in and replace them at about that same rate. The subscriber number goes up, but that's why that number doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's
Anyway, that was a completely impromptu, because we just happened to get hijacked by somebody. Hi, how's it going? Hey. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hey, guys. I'm Portable Orange. I do deep dives on a lot of stuff. I have a big one I've been working on for a while that I am going through copyright issues with at the moment. But normally it's ancient history. No spoilers. I got to save that till I drop it. Hopefully tomorrow. I think I'll have it all resolved.
That is entirely fair. You've done things like beefing with people over how gay Rome was.
Yes, that's how I started. Yeah. No, my whole channel started from this guy by the name of Leather Apron Club had a video about how Rome was gay, and I watched it and I was like, oh, this is pretty convincing. And he's got a lot of like good sources and stuff like that. So I just because with my experience, for those who don't know, I used to be very, very far right. I mean, I would have called myself a nice guy national socialist, but white nationalist, whatever you want to call me. Mm-hmm. And I realized I'd kind of gotten tricked, and I got myself out, which is a story that's more common than you might expect. So ever since then, I've been a lot more careful about like making sure I can point to things to back up claims that I make, because a lot of what drove me to that place was like unsourced claims. So I watched this one guy, and he has a bunch of sources, and I start reading through the sources, and his first source is like, oh, Rome hated this thing because it was an older guy getting with a younger boy. And then I read it, and it's like the older guy was trying to keep the younger boy as a debt slave, and like use his body in that sense. And I was like, well, that doesn't really seem like a gay thing necessarily. And then as I kept reading, I found more of that stuff. That was my first video. And then basically the rest of my channel has been things of that nature, like very, very deep dives into primary sources and seeing what they say as opposed to necessarily what other people are saying about various topics.
Okay, fair enough. I know that so we can agree that the Greeks, at least, though.
Oh yeah, no. Romans were gay. They were much gayer than I even thought. That was the conclusion I came to in the end. But it was more just that he hadn't done research. He'd kind of made up quotes, and reading through his stuff, it was just more and more realizing it was either misconstruing, not understanding, or probably just being dishonest.
I guess it's also just like one of the worst things you can do, which is coming to the technical right conclusion, but having all of the wrong methods getting yourself there, and then suddenly it feels like the next time that you want to research something, you'll use all those same methods, thinking that you're just going to trip into the correct answer, or maybe just not even doing any research in the first place. I think the latter. I found that that's one of the most insidious things I've encountered for people in general, is when they have a correct opinion, but the work that they did to get to that opinion was not enough. It wasn't what you would expect. You know philosophy, right?
To an extent. Go ahead and define anything you want to define.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I used to be, that was my hyperfixation for a while when I began my channel, so I still have like some random things knocking around. But there's a concept called Clifford's Principle.
Unfamiliar. Go ahead.
So Clifford's Principle is, if you have a belief, you have a statement, do you have enough to justify the belief? So like the example that's usually given for that is like, you've got an old beater car and you're fairly certain the transmission's going out, but you've got a road trip coming up and you say, it'll make it. It'll make it. It'll make it. Yeah, it'll make it. It's a violation of Clifford's Principle. You don't have enough information to get to that conclusion, and even in the world where you're right, even if you do that 4-hour road trip, you get to the end, the car made it, and then you made it back, you still didn't have enough information to make the claim to begin with. You were correct, but all of the work you did to get there was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part about that, is then somebody will use that as their foundation for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Is that kind of what you end up seeing with some of these people when you're looking at their work, for instance?
I don't think even, because I really do think there's just a lack of engagement coupled with there are a couple just genuinely bad actors. God, I wish I'd been able to get the video I'm working on out. It's actually perfectly applies to this.
It would be perfect for this particular conversation.
For this particular conversation to be perfect, but like let me say this. It's about conspiracy theories. I could say that much. There are some people I have found, because I'm like a long time, like I posted on X for years. Like I love conspiracy theories. I've been in that space for a long time. I
grew up as an Alex Jones fan. I feel you.
Oh, there you go. I never got into Jones as much. Adrenochrome was about as far as I ever went with him.
I think mine was a friend. So when I was a Christian, a friend of mine wanted to like shake my faith at the time by showing me Zeitgeist, because of course it has all of the like Christianity debunk stuff in it. And you know how there were like 10 different recuts of Zeitgeist floating around the internet. The one that I watched had a bunch of footage from Loose Change cut into it. And so all of the stuff with Alex Jones from the Loose Change part, that was the stuff that I got in there, and it didn't stop me from being a Christian at the time, but it did make me go down the like hyperfixation rabbit hole of who were these people making these claims, and then I became an Alex Jones fan during that. And when you say conspiracy theories, I'm just like, yes, I know that red flag. It waves.
But there are certain things, like, because that's my whole issue with it. Like, part of what I talk about in the video is, like, there are conspiracies that happen. Like, Watergate was a conspiracy that we know for a fact happened.
We know that
Iran-Contra.
MK Ultra is a big one.
MK Ultra.
That's an easy one to point to.
Like, there's a billion, like, real conspiracy theories. And my problem is that I feel like there are bad actors who know people like conspiracy theories. And so the second any big event happens, they start pushing whatever the most interesting story could be because they make money off it.
I feel with the recent things that happened with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, that happened a lot,
I've seen that, because I have a friend who believes that he was shot in the back of the neck, and that the front of the neck isn't, that the front of the neck is simultaneously an exit wound, and also the bullet did not exit the body.
Yep.
And I'm just sitting here as a person who owns a lot of guns. I'm sitting here trying to go like, that's not how the pumpkin looks when I shoot it. that's not how exit works with bullets. So.
Yeah, they stopped, but the pure air pressure just kind of knocked a hole, but that was it. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting rabbit hole to go through. But the reason that we got in contact was because I did a review of your video where you had said you had gone down the outright rabbit hole and come back out, and I went through that because those stories are really interesting to me. As somebody who went down a truncated version of that, more just the anti-SJW pipeline, not fully going into the alt-right stuff. I did not go down that full on, like, let's start questioning if the Holocaust happened. I didn't go that far. So hearing from people who did go further than I did down that rabbit hole is always super interesting to me. Can you give, for anybody in my audience who might not have seen that video, which y'all should watch, both his video and my video of it, can you give a TLDR of what that journey looked like for you? Yeah, I think I was raised Catholic. I was raised very conservative in Massachusetts, a very blue state. So I kind of grew up arguing politics with people, thinking I was a hell of a lot smarter than I was. Think about a reverse Socrates. I was the dumbest because I thought I knew everything. And then from there, going to college, I did start to shift a bit more to the left. Bernie brought me over to populism a bit. And when Bernie lost, I was like, okay, well, who else is a populist? Big Daddy T. Went over to him and was just supporting Trump. Again, not even from like well-rationed positions, but just the idea of like, he's a populist. Build the wall sounds great because a wall is cool, not because I really want to keep immigrants out.
It's the Tucker Carlson strategy. Say the thing that laymen are going to be able to nod their heads with.
Yes. And then when Trump got elected, a lot of people in those spaces were further to the right. And you just start seeing a lot of memes and you start getting depressed because you feel like, oh, Trump's not building the wall. He's not draining the swamp. He's not doing X and Y and Z. And so at that point, I was watching. It's actually funny. One of the biggest things that got me into it was this comedy show called Murdoch, which was like animated like Wojaks. And they were very far right. I remember.
I'm guessing it's a play on Rupert Murdoch.
No, it's not. It's a play. I forget where the name Murdoch came from, but I remember they had some long talk, just a live stream where they were answering questions, and one of them was about that, and it was from the Mario Brothers movie. I forget why he picked Mario Brothers
movie.
So I forget why he picked Murdoch specifically, but the reason he called it Murdoch was because in the Mario movie, the live action one from forever ago. Yeah. They say, your name's Mario. And he goes, yes, it's Mario. So he did Murdoch. Which is where we even got the Mario, Luigi, Mario thing from in the first place. Exactly. It's the... Man, there's... Fun aside, I used to watch that movie as a kid, and I loved it as a kid because there was so little video game media. Yeah, it was pre-YouTube. So there was so little media about games that I enjoyed that I latched onto anything, no matter how bad. Because, I had no way of discerning quality. That was one thing. Yeah, but also, I wanted things that represented the things that I enjoyed. So I grabbed onto that. So that's interesting. Yeah. Looking through stuff from Murdoch, I'm seeing, like, Murdoch explains race realism in 2.5 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So basically, it was like there were like two timelines. It was like a Me More timeline, a sitcom. And the sitcom was just a very funny kind of sitcom show with a very white nationalist bend. And you watch it just thinking like, oh, this is a funny joke. And I was already very anti-SJW. I was already opposed to, just like policing of speech and stuff like that. And so I was sort of primed to just be in the spaces where Holocaust denial memes and that kind of stuff were shared around. Yeah. And I think, because what I always tell people is like, you don't know you deny the Holocaust until you've already been denying it for a while. Because suddenly it's like, I remember the wooden doors meme, which for those who don't know,
that was the one you talked about in your video.
It was the one I talked about in my video. It wasn't the most convincing for me by far. The very convincing one for me at the time was the population numbers, where there's like a map with the Jewish population numbers of Nazi-occupied territories in Europe, and there's like not even 6 million Jews in Nazi-occupied territories. That's ignoring that 2 million of them were actually from Russia and were killed as prisoners of war as part of the Eastern Front. And it's also ignoring that Poland lost a lot of Jews, and Poland had like 3 million prior to the war or something like that.
Yeah,
but
so
anyway,
they didn't go for just the ones inside their borders.
Yes.
They went outside their borders and started attacking the same people.
And on top of that, even if you look up, like if you go to the Holocaust website, they'll tell you 4,000 died in camps, 2,000 died as prisoners of war on the Eastern Front. So, but anyway, like at the time, just looking at the numbers, I kind of was like, oh my gosh, maybe this isn't real. And the weird thing is, when you start denying the Holocaust, the first thing you want to do is tell everyone around you that you have some questions about the Holocaust. So that's this is like, because I've had a bunch of people reach out to me since the video who've been through the same stuff I've been through. And most of them say the same thing. It's like the second it happens, you cannot wait to talk to people about it because you feel like you just found out this huge secret that you can share. You have to wake more people up, right? And so slowly I lost my friends. Things got worse and worse.
That's the same thing that happened to me with when I was watching Zeitgeist and I started learning about like the Bilderberg group and stuff like that. Learning about the Federal Reserve. Hey, here's how money is made. Here's how borrowing on interest is done. I started going down that rabbit hole of like, if somebody mentioned something, I would kind of like throw a softball version of my beliefs at them to see how they would respond. And if they responded with either curiosity, I could go into things, or my favorite one was when they would nod their head and go, I know. And it's like, kindred spirit, you also believe this. I had a scenario when I was working at McDonald's where another worker there was a deep ingrained conspiracy theorist, and a third worker there was mildly interested in these. It's worker interested. They're going to smile and nod as long as they have to until it's time to clock out. That kind of thing. And so we were just like back and forthing on this, and the dude looked really fascinated in it, and they're just like, this is amazing. We're waking this third person up. And it's you're not God, it's weird because it's that shared feeling of having special information that you want to give to the world, and you feel like you're now in a privileged position to do so. Yeah.
And in a weird way, what's been fun for me through my own journey, like making content on YouTube, is that is what I do now. The difference is I'm actually looking into primary sources, and I feel much more confident in making these claims. But that's essentially what I'm still doing, and I still can't shut up about it. So there you go.
I see. Nothing has changed. Good talk.
Really, nothing has changed at all. Yeah. So then just to quickly wrap it up. So I had a conversation with my aunt one day where I was talking to her about this. My aunt is like very dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. She worked for the government, for the Department of Transportation for years. And she and I would always talk politics. And, I was pro-Trump. She was anti-Trump. So we'd have those conversations. Then I turned anti-Trump because he wasn't far right enough. But that's beside the point. So eventually we got to the point where I was talking to her about the Holocaust and being like, yeah, there's these wooden doors, and that doesn't make sense. And she was like, oh, where'd you read this? And I just Googled it because I figured, well, this is a true thing, so I can find it on Google. So I should be able to find it. Exactly. And I found someone debunking it from a website called Holocaust Controversies. And even in that moment, in the video, I kind of describe it as like that was the moment where everything changed. Not quite right away. Like it was sort of the thing where I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm wrong about that, but there must be other things. But that definitely set me down a path of doing more and more researching, realizing I was wrong about that. Then I started getting more into online political content, which is not a good idea, but still worked in this case. And slowly I just like drifted away from those positions, but it took years. And in my video, I don't talk so much about how I made my way back because that wasn't the point. I initially just did it to show people how well-meaning people can fall to the far right, and like just give people empathy for that and show people how it can happen. How I climbed back out was years of like doing research and stumbling with friendships and relationships and like, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back kind of stuff. And then really it wasn't until I'd say maybe like just pre-COVID that I sort of was coming a lot more around, and certainly by like 2021, 2022, I was like pretty far in like, I mean, it depends on where you are. The internet's a weird place to discuss politics, but I'll say at least establishment Democrat, which I'm sure some people will see as on the right, but at the very least, it's not as far right as I could be. So
no, that's entirely fair. It is still interesting seeing the sort of like rubber banding that happens because quite literally the Socratic method was used on you. Hey, you believe this thing? That's cool.
to an extent, yeah.
Why do you believe that? Where did you hear that? Where did you read that? And just like, I will say, good on you for taking that time to actually go do the research, even if the reason was effectively, I'm gonna own this lib with facts and data. That's kind of where it sounded like it was coming from.
No, you're right about that.
Like it's that, but at least recognizing that when you couldn't find the facts and data you were going for, you didn't go a step further to start saying like, it's been buried. Because like that's another thing that I've seen when you can't find evidence of something, they'll go, oh, well, you're not going to find it on the internet. It's been buried on the internet. It's been censored on the internet. And you're just like, I feel like there are murders less censored on the internet than this information would have been, but okay.
Well, and that's like, for me, part of what I also was trying to communicate with the video, which I don't think I did a very good job of, is you're not going to get people out that easily. Mm-hmm. Like people who are like me and they're naturally curious and they're in a place where like, you know, they think going to the far right is going to make things better and it makes things worse. And so they, you know, realize they need to make their way back out. They'll get themselves out if you give them enough time and a helping hand. But really what we need to focus on is catching people before they fall. Because once people are down in there, you can show them all the evidence of the world. And it's so easy to jump to something else to say, well, that maybe that's wrong, but this other thing is right, and so on and so forth. So it's like people who are deep in the far right stuff, I don't necessarily think it's worth trying to dig them out, which is hard for some people to hear. But as someone who was there, it's like there were people who tried. I wasn't ready. Like, you know, it's
yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I've had a bunch of people commenting in a video that I did recently where I went to the No Kings protest and found one of the counter protesters, and I went and talked to the counter protester and just, you know, had a conversation with them about why they believe the things they did. There are some crazy things that came out of his mouth. You know, things that you can guess most of them pretty easily, but it's like George Soros funded everybody being here. The police are in cahoots with the leftists. Like all of this fun stuff that you're just sitting there going like, I don't think you have any backing for any of the things you're saying. But I did find that the thing that always worked really well in conversations like that was just throwing the ball in their court. Hey, you believe this thing. And you know what? That's super cool. I'm super interested in that as well. Can you tell me where you got that info? I want to know more. Where did you get that info? And a thing that I've, at least where I live, and it might just be a rural Georgia thing. I don't know if you've had a similar scenario elsewhere, but where I live most of the time, people don't have a good source for where they've heard X thing. For this guy specifically, it was, well, Trump's been talking about it. Yeah, like, well, that's not a good source, my guy. My favorite guy in the White House chair said a thing. I don't know why you and I should be believing what quote the establishment says. Like you can go down the conspiracy rabbit hole again and again. It's like you believe what the state told you? Wow, that's wild. I don't have that much faith in the state.
No, this is something that like has bugged me for years now, because I feel like the modern like conspiratorial questioning movement, one of the things they always say is like, you know, oh, trust the experts, as like a derogatory phrase for like these ivory tower, you know, academics, like dismiss them because we shouldn't believe them. We should believe evidence. But no one's going around getting evidence. They're just listening to different experts.
They're like, just asking questions. That's all they're doing.
They are.
You know, they're just asking questions.
And it's like, well, let's not trust doctors. Let's trust podcasters. And it's like, that's always insane to me, where it's like, I found one doctor who said the mRNA vaccine, you know, is fake. And, you know, if I'm like, well, but I found 100,000 that said it wasn't, it's like, oh, but those are paid up. Like, it's the amount of like, the way we've constructed things as to like, the conclusion is really what matters. The question and the evidence doesn't matter anymore. And like I just feel that so keenly that it's just become like, well, I like this person, so they're telling me the truth. I'm going to trust Candace Owens. I'm going to trust Tucker Carlson because I like them, not necessarily because they're actually giving me evidence that I can turn around and give to other people. So yeah,
is there a really prominent, like, I know obviously like the mRNA vaccine, the COVID vaccines, that's an example that you did give, but are there any other like really prominent examples of that you've heard for like a right wing or a more like quote quote centrist podcaster saying something that people just graft onto without getting any evidence? Like, do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, well, RFK in general, pretty much everything he says, it's like the majority of the science doesn't back it up. Or it's like a misconstruing, like his ideas about raw milk, where it's like, yeah, technically you don't have to pasteurize it. There's other things you can do, but that doesn't mean that like don't do anything to the milk. It just means that there's ways to sanitize milk without necessarily heating it up really quickly. Like, in terms of other, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Oh, I mean, Charlie Kirk's a great one. Like the whole Israel thing. I think there isn't really much evidence there when you look there. Dancing Israelis is another good one. Most people don't know. I forget if that was in Loose Change or not, but Dancing Israelis is this idea that like Israel did 9/11, and you can tell because there were these Israelis who were there dancing. They were definitely spies, and they were definitely there doing stuff for Israel. But it was Iranian television, I think, who claimed they were dancing. There's no evidence of that anywhere. But still, the term for it is dancing Israelis.
See, I've actually never heard the term dancing Israelis before.
That's so fun. So I guess it's not in Loose Change then. But yeah, one of the big 9/11 things is there's some photos. Even if you Google it, you can find it pretty easily. There's photos of a bunch of Israelis like smiling and hanging out around the World Trade Center. I think there is even like, they have like a paper airplane or something, and they're near the Twin Towers. And they were arrested because they were filming 9/11 as it happened. And they were actually held by the FBI for months until they were released back to Israel. And they gave an interview when they got back to Israel. And one of the things they said was, we were there to document it. So people were like, they were there to document 9/11. Whereas to me, it's pretty clear that they were just spies and they were there to collect information. They were spying, they were just clandestine operatives. And when 9/11 happens, obviously they're going to turn their cameras to it and say, oh, we should start filming this because, what other Israelis in whatever the Israeli secret intelligence agency is called was there to film it. And then it was a bunch of like Middle Eastern, not just Iran, but I believe Iraq at the time as well. Like basically just seized on that story as like, see, Israel's evil. Israel did 9/11, blah, 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 blah. And then that got spun into its own conspiracy theory. But again, if you ask anyone like, oh, where's the video of them dancing? Where's the picture of them dancing? It doesn't exist because
that's
on 9/11.
That's what I was trying to find. I was like looking through Google Images, feeling like I would find something there. And I just found a lot of stock photos. I haven't found anything.
Maybe they scrubbed it because I definitely know. I've seen photos of these people. I've definitely seen photos of these people. Let me open my. Sorry, this is the issue too. When I'm in the middle of like doing my companion doc, I just had to open 5,000 tabs because that's how I do research. I just have like, it's like writing a paper in college. I have like 16 windows open.
And the worst thing, the best thing to ever happen to browsers is holding your tab history whenever your computer resets.
Yes.
It is the best thing for my ADHD.
Depending. Yeah.
It depends. It depends.
Yeah, I can't find that on Google. I'm sure I can find it. Let me see if I can go on. Probably if I go on to one of the archives. Trying to find. Because I'm genuinely so surprised that I can't find. No, they just have the actual ones. Yeah, because the old website I used to know about got shut down.
I feel like this is the same thing as the blaming Israel for Charlie Kirk's murder stuff. And I recognize that even Charlie Kirk before his death had said something along the lines of like, Israel's probably not too happy with me or some shit like that. And people have like latched onto that to go, yes, a person who has 10 billion opinions about him online, none of those ever could have led to somebody doing something violent, but Israel.
Yeah. No, it's the whole thing again is built on like a lot of vague and even Candace Owens being like, I'm going to violate the gag order that I am not technically, beholden to, and then just has done nothing since. The only things I can find, it's interesting, their faces, I'm chatting you right now. The only thing I can find is their faces are blocked out, which is funny because I definitely remember seeing their faces before. Yeah, it's so funny. I can't find a lot of the photos anymore. But yeah, it got scrubbed, I guess. But that's definitely one of the photos I remember seeing.
I guess we just need to start asking questions again. Just start asking questions about the photos.
But yeah, that's I mean that I think is another good example though, because it's like they weren't dancing, and it comes from Iranian television, which it's not like Iran and Israel are best friends, especially not in 2001. So like, yeah, but a bunch of people ran with it because again, it's convenient and it helps fund a more interesting story. Because I think Bush doing 9/11 wasn't nearly as interesting as Israel doing 9/11, because then you can tie it into U.S. liberty and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, but so when I was on that rabbit hole, it was very much a Bush did 9/11 so that we could go get oil from another country.
Yep.
Like that was the prevailing version of that for me. However, and I'm getting messages here. So Dorito, do understand, I can't look at my Discord because my Discord is what I'm showing you on screen. I appreciate I appreciate Dorito, my mod, being the technology understander here, and me refusing to open it up on browser window that would allow me to look. We'll have an ongoing war. It's fine. He gave me an oven once that burned a TV dinner, so I have immense hatred for the man. I'm kidding. I don't really. But. So, what would you say is the evidence that it burned? Dorito says it burned more than a TV dinner. You're right. It burned our friendship. But what would you say is probably like your first red flag that somebody is far enough gone down that rabbit hole for conspiracy stuff that you can't really give them any information that they can grab onto to pull themselves out?
Well, see, the thing is, I'm in a unique position because I think I can reach people who are much farther than the average person is able to reach.
Okay.
Because I can dog whistle essentially. Like I know enough stuff from being there. Like one trick that I have found, which I do not recommend anyone else try, but like works pretty well, is basically like selling liberalism as Nazism. Because I do think it's somewhat easy to say like, oh, you're right. These people coming into our country, like we should be able to preserve white culture. But why is it that the white culture everyone's talking about is so similar to modern culture that we see in like African countries? Like when you think about countries that are accepting of gay and trans people, why is it all white countries? And usually they'll say blah 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 Jews, and then you can go down the route of like, right, but like who's telling you that? Like, isn't it weird that like the West seems to all have this single culture that has these things and the rest of the world doesn't? And now it seems like a bunch of people are coming in and saying, no, Western culture, you have to change. You have to go back to like isolating yourself while the rest of the world gets to be more and more successful. Like that's some kind of stuff I can do. And I think for most people, it's like you have to understand the thinking behind it to get there. So for me, the red flags are usually I'll dog whistle at someone, say I don't believe something, and they get very mad and just send me like usually 500 pieces of evidence.
Oh, it's when you've struck the chord and they've gone into their folder of fighting. Yeah,
exactly. And they just throw out 500 things with the knowledge that obviously I'm not going to be able to respond to all 500 things.
Yeah, it's the Gish Gallop. It's really like it's why Dwayne Gish used that technique in debates, is because it takes longer to respond and debunk something than it does to say a false thing. You can say 10 false things, and then when your opponent can only respond to 2 or 3 of them, or, recognizes they're looking at a stone wall and says, fuck it, you can say, see, my opponent didn't debunk what I said. That means I'm right.
Yeah, even in like modern debate, I think that's a thing where you just speak really, really quickly.
Yeah, it's called,
try and just get more points out.
Yeah, it's actually called the Gish Gallop. Like it was because Dwayne Gish did that as a technique when trying to sell creationism and the idea that the Earth was 6,000 years old. When he would use that technique, the technique got coined because of him.
Yeah, that's funny. I had no idea that was actually like based off a person's name. But yeah, that for me, I'd say for other people, usually what it's going to be is it's tough to spot because a lot of times how people signal, to me at least, that they are pretty far gone is usually they will put out a dog whistle to everyone else, and that can come in one of two ways. But if you're not familiar enough with it, you're not going to be able to engage with it necessarily.
Mhm.
But I would say for the most part, if you're trying to have a genuine conversation with someone and they're speaking in vague terms you don't quite understand, or they're mentioning a lot of specific things, it's usually not worth engaging. So if you're trying to say the Holocaust happened and they say, well, why didn't they find pink bodies? And you're like, pink, what do you even mean pink body? That person is probably just not worth responding to, because it's like, you're just going to have to end up doing so much research to even try and push back against them. And if they're that far gone already, there probably isn't much left for you to do. I really do think it's like people feel disaffected. People feel like society isn't helping them. And that's the moment to catch them. And the moment they've already found a group of people who say it's society's fault, there's a lot of like inertia is how I describe it on the far right, where one of the things I had to do when I came out of the far right was I had to take responsibility for kind of my actions and my opinions and how I'd driven friends away and stuff like that, and taken a real hard look at myself and my
makes
behaviors.
sense.
But that's difficult. That's really, really hard to do. And so for a lot of people who are in the far right space, part of what keeps them there is if they were ever to leave, the amount of like introspection it would take is such a painful thing to go through that they would do almost anything to keep themselves there. And so that's sort of what I'm saying. Like, we need to catch people before they have developed a certain identity around these ideas of it's immigrants' fault, it's gay people's fault.
So we have to get better at making sure that before these people start internalizing these beliefs, not just believing them, but like taking these as a part of their foundation.
Yeah,
we have to be able to get them before.
Yeah, like if someone had caught me at the phase where I was just seeing wooden door memes, I think it would have been pretty easy to get me out. But if someone found me when I was posting wooden door memes, that would have been a hell of a lot harder to get me out. So it's like that's kind of what I say is the line. Is it's like the moment someone's identity is I'm not a loser, I'm actually cool and based, and the only thing for that is that my ancestors were cool and based. I don't actually have to do anything. Like that's such a hard barrier to overcome. Yeah.
Man, how do you even that comes with a bit of an issue though, because then you've got to be able to recognize when somebody's at that phase, because once somebody's at the phase of posting those memes, that's usually when you catch it. That's almost always when you catch it, is the minute they start vocalizing that information. It's very hard to catch it beforehand. I guess at that point you have to kind of be more willing to proactively talk about harder subjects with more people so that you can kind of get fish while they're in the barrel, is probably the best way to put it. So like you're in a regular group of friends, you throw out there a pretty, basic understandable opinion like, man, the Holocaust was terrible, and you wait until somebody has like that questioning look on their face. I don't even know how you would go about getting to somebody before they get to the part of posting, because you're not in their head. You have no way of knowing where they are on that journey of self-destruction.
No, of course not. And I think that's why for me it was about creating spaces that people can find, where I like part of how I found my way down there was I was just sort of anti-SJW, and then I find Joe Rogan, and he's talking to people, and some of those people are talking about Trump. So now I find Trump communities, and then within Trump communities, I find people who are a little more, sending me to like mind waves and stuff like that. And then you're able to go into like farther and farther right communities. And it's just this, like when people talk about the pipeline, it is a pipeline in a sense of like, there's a thing set up to get you there. And no one earlier on the path is trying to get you down there. You go there yourself. But like, that's where I think we need like, I don't know, Lewis's, I forget the name for it, but like pressure release. You need something where someone can be like, man, I don't like SJWs telling me what to say. And then you can have a community that goes, yeah, it does suck when that happens. But how about we talk about the ideas and we don't censor speech as much, but we talk about like, hey, maybe there are some problems in society and the way we've organized things. And maybe we can do some stuff about that. And yeah, the speech is cringe. Maybe I get that. And like, almost like dirtbag left, like id pole stuff or something. I don't know.
I was
but
about
like
to say, it sounds very much like your dirtbag left tactics of let me be 4chan COD lobby edgy, so that people who are going to right-wing spaces, because that's the only outlet for that kind of humor, so that they have it's not really a honeypot, but it is effectively the same concept of honeypot. Let me create a space that people who are in that not even ideology at that point, but just like they have those habits that they can go to in order to do so. And then if you do that, if you create those spaces, if you have those places for those people to go, suddenly they feel like they can openly be themselves. And then when they say one of those opinions that, you know, maybe leading them down Holocaust denial or anything like that, suddenly there's a space of people who are able to push back against that, but they're not going to push back against that in the sort of like, I guess the best term for it would be like the woke scoldy way. They're like, how dare you say that? How dare you? Like, they'll get offended over you having a wrong opinion. And instead, they'd be more inclined to actually verbally spar with you. And for some people, that's probably what they're even looking for. I know for me, years ago, back when I was younger, I felt like I gravitated towards a lot of those verbal sparring grounds because it was a place where I could do that. As I've gotten older, I've gravitated away from them because my mentality now is, I don't have the fucking time for this. This is dumb. But 10 years ago, that wasn't my mentality. 10 years ago, it was, I want to get in the fight online. That sounds fun. I want to piss somebody off. I want to make their day worse. I'm going to go play League of Legends.
That's me. Oh, man. I did have to stop playing League of Legends, but yeah.
I feel like the Venn diagram of rage baiters and League players is a circle.
Yeah, probably to a certain extent, because it's like that's the only way you can cope with playing a game that bad and that addicting at the same time.
You just play Jungle Lulu because you know it pisses off the Rengar even more when they died while polymorphed, because you just happened to be playing attack speed and they were building a Spirit Visage.
Yep. Yeah, like counter meta builds that specifically. Yeah, my favorite was always Jungle Leona, but I played.
I love Jungle Leona.
Jungle Leona was fun back in the day. Yeah, the pop out, flash ult, sword onto him to root right as the stun comes up. Yeah.
I liked it because all of her abilities were effectively AoEs, so the jungle items just kept you at full health at all times. So you just pop out of the jungle like, hey, you know what's cool about my Q? I don't have to click anywhere but your balls.
Yeah. Oh my god, the flash stuff, the flash Qs were almost more fun than flash ults, honestly.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think that like Cumtown, I actually think is a really good example of this, where like it was a podcast that like I think was able to have this edgy sense to it, but was still able to push more left ideas. And now I think you could even see, in my opinion, Stavros Halkias turning his podcast into something more of that nature that is able to push the more left stuff, but still has a space for conversation, a space for men to have problems and have conversations about those problems in a judgment-free zone that still has like this understanding of like liberalism, I guess, or like the left in terms of, you know, whatever we want to think.
So I'm not actually familiar with Cumtown.
Oh, Cumtown is it's something I'm far too obsessed with, actually. But it was a podcast started by this guy Nick Mullen, who with these two guys, Stavros Halkias and Adam Friedland. The Adam Friedland show you may have seen. That's the only thing I could think of. But it was a podcast that was on for a few years, and it was a very kind of like edgy, funny, stupid podcast. I think the tagline was "Being gay with your dad." That's what the podcast was about. And I think it just sort of, you know, it was during COVID, so it was sort of like it exploded as like a cultural phenomenon at that time. And then it ended a few years ago, and all three of them kind of split up and did their own thing. But it was like the main guy, Nick Mullen, like a lot of his jokes were like being very racist. He'd put on like racist characters, but he was also like, but we should have healthcare, and I'm not actually racist, and I think like white nationalists are bad and stuff like that.
Okay, so it's like let me give you guys some Avenue Q racism.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
And that'll be the seasoning to this dish where we talk about, hey, maybe it's really bad that your grandma's dying of cancer and you have to spend $40,000 just to get her seen by a doctor to say there's nothing we can do. Like maybe that's a bad system, actually.
But even like I think even in that, like the show itself wasn't really political. Like I don't know if you know, are you familiar with Chapo Trap House at all?
I am familiar with Chapo Trap House.
Okay. So they were friends. The two podcast groups were very, very close, and they'd go on each other's shows a lot.
Okay.
And Chapo Trap House, oh man, I can't say it. Chapo Trap House very much was the political side, and Cumtown would even like do jokes where they were pretending to do serious political commentary, but they wouldn't. They do jokes about like, I can't even think of one. This is stupid. I can't even think of a single joke right now. Like Andrew Yang. They do an impression of Andrew Yang and give him either like a very intense Chinese accent or like a flourishing accent.
Like let me just make him sound like Uncle from Jackie Chan Adventures.
Basically,
as he talks to me about universal basic income.
Yeah, and I think like Nick Mullen even he had like a TikTok account, and he would joke about like, is it okay if I just tape one eye back, like that kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it was funny. It was really funny. And it's like, I think in a way there was an outlet for like, I don't know, just people who were COD gamers, people who were just
let me get this sort of like, I guess the best way to put this would be like fangless racism.
Yeah.
Where like it's your 90s era Comedy Central racism, but you're not going that extra mile. You're not going, hey, here's a black joke and also phrenology, actually. Hey, here's a joke about, Jewish people's noses and also wooden doors. Like, it's not doing that. It's not saying, like, here's a Jewish joke and also I'm going to call everybody that I don't like a good goyim. I'm not going to go and do that fucking shit. Whereas when you look at the right-wing versions of that same style of humor, they do that lead in with the, hey, let me do a bog standard Jewish joke, and then let me, call somebody a good goyim for defending the Jews in some way. I can't even think of one that would be used. Like, I guess defending bank systems would probably be one that they would say, that's definitely a Jewish thing, and you would see them make the joke, you'd laugh at the joke, and then you'd get led into the far more racist version of that humor afterwards. And now suddenly it's incredibly malicious. And then I guess, like, after that, you'd have somebody who's far more liberal-minded, who's in more of one of the, like, I don't like using the word hugbox space, but very much in one of the more hugboxy spaces, who just sees the racist joke to begin with, and that's the moment where they clutch their pearls.
Yeah.
And you just kind of have to sit there and go, like, there's some utility to that, though.
Well, and I think, too, like, there's two types of racist jokes. One is the humor is the racism in and of itself. And the other is, isn't it funny that people think this? Like, the humor is you pretending to be a racist person as a mockery of racism in and of itself. Like, for those who don't know, my wife is black. And she was very aware of this. I told her like date 3 of my whole political journey. And obviously just because we're like, an interracial married couple, we talk about race a lot. Like we have like racial humor. And I've even had to learn to tone those down around white people because sometimes they get uncomfortable. Around black people, it's not nearly as much of an issue. But it's like, sometimes I'll make a joke where it's like, wouldn't it just be so funny for someone to be super racist about like us doing X and Y and Z? And we'll even face sometimes like discrimination in public, quite rarely, of course. But like we do sometimes even face, like, I remember we were at Disney World and like there was a black man who was very upset that we were together. Like,
really?
That's something we face. Yeah. I mean, it was, it was whatever. It was one stupid guy.
You managed to find Uncle Ruckus out in the wild?
He was, I don't even think he was quite Uncle Ruckus. I think he was like a Hebrew nationalist type of just like, each with their own kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Like the Black Hebrew Israelites.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I'm very, very familiar. Okay. Yes. I hate that I'm very, very familiar. But
well, I mean, but it shows the effectiveness. Like that, all they do is be inflammatory to get people to pay attention to them, to then get more people on their side. Because it's that same pipeline thing.
That actually brings me to another. There's an aspect of that racially charged conspiracy hole that people can find themselves in that I learned about a few years ago, actually, and it was a Hotep culture.
Oh, yeah. Hotep.
And So when I was researching into it, it was always having like this two sides of a coin problem, where on the one side of a coin, somebody who would be part of Hotep culture would say, well, white medicine, it doesn't fucking work on us. And then you just sit there, you're like, that sounds really dumb. But then you would look at some of the experiments we've done specifically on black people for being black in the medical field in the United States and go, oh, no, you have a really good reason for distrusting this infrastructure. You're just going a step further than you should. You're going, white medicine doesn't work on us, and your reason makes sense. There was a lot of racial abuse that happened in our medical industry. That does not mean that acetaminophen doesn't work on you. That's not what that means now.
Yeah, I don't even know that I'd go so far as to say, like, there is a good reason for it. Because I think that, like, I think one of the things that America has not done successfully, but at the very least has tried to do, is acknowledge a lot of our past of racism and try and address it. I don't believe successfully in the slightest.
No.
But I think that there is something to be said for the fact that because I'm pretty sure, not that I looked up this statistic for any reason, but pregnant black women die in childbirth more than any other race of women. And for the most part, from the studies I've seen, it seems to be from an underreporting of issues from the doctors. So if they're in a city and they're going to see a doctor who is white, that doctor might not listen to them as much. So there are certain differences in I don't even want to say white and black bodies necessarily, but just in terms of treatment and how things are communicated. That's probably a better way to put it, how things are communicated, that I think we don't address as a society. But I think the problem is taking that and then going, therefore the system never stopped being against us, is kind of a bad thing. Because in the same way that you're saying, that doesn't mean acetaminophen doesn't work on you, I would say, right, but they're using that logic of, because people experimented on us, we should forever distrust the system always and not remotely engage with it.
I guess maybe it'd probably be a good idea for us to quickly define Hotep for the audience.
Oh, sure, right, yeah.
Because there may be people who may not know.
There was a scientist a long time ago. No, sorry. But yeah, Hoteps are basically a group of people who believe that black people were the original race on Earth. They were in the vast majority of spaces on Earth. And then some of them believe that an evil scientist called Yakub created a slave race of people, white people, that everyone used, and then Yakub made them more powerful, so they overthrew the black people. However, most Hoteps these days instead just go on the fact that most of the famous figures throughout history were black and African in some extent, and they were later whitewashed by later colonial powers. I think post-Renaissance is usually where the timelines fall, but it varies depending on who you talk to.
I think it's actually where we got the "We Were Kings" meme from. Almost exclusively.
Yeah. Yeah, we was Kongs and shit. Yeah.
So with another way to look at it, a more layman version of this, because there's always degrees of this. The lower degree of this would usually be somebody who looks at Afrocentrism the same way that a white nationalist looks at Eurocentrism. They've seen Eurocentrism and they said, "I'm going to go one step beyond." Hotep has looked at Afrocentrism and said, "I'm going to go one step beyond."
Yeah.
Now,
that's a much better way of putting it, honestly.
Their reasoning for it may be different. There may be very different conspiracy rabbit hole reasons for that. Somebody may be like, well, what about the Tuskegee experiments? That's why I got here. But regardless of how people get there, that is an aspect that I've seen, that I got introduced to years ago. And I didn't know about that until a friend of mine, while I was doing a video debunk, they were like, hey, you should probably know this about the person you're doing a debunk on. This is the kind of person they are. This is what their history is here. And I had no idea until I got, that background from a friend of mine, which definitely helped.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. I've encountered, my most recent video, which caused a bit of a stir, was on Proto-Indo-Europeans. So again, this idea that there was this group of people that spread out and kind of conquered. Basically, if you draw a line from Britain to India and include Spain in there, it was this group of people. And so that's why white people are superior, because for whatever reason in the Middle East and India, those people were overwritten. And I kind of was like, hey, that's not really what the evidence points to. It's more just a construction of a theory. And the people who were attacking me for the most part were white nationalists, because for them, it's a nice scientific, like scientific quote unquote backing to their theory, when in reality what it really is like a bunch of people sort of grasping at similarities and then claiming to understand the reason behind those similarities and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of times when you run into people who are spreading misinformation, 9 times out of 10 there's some larger movement they're a part of that misinformation is an important key in that group, not necessarily in terms of the misinformation itself being important.
No, that makes sense, because it just becomes, like, at a certain point, it becomes such an ingrained part of somebody's identity that the mechanics of what the beliefs are kind of cease mattering.
Yeah. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's like, this is in service of some greater thing. And at the end of the day, if you could disprove that singular thing, it doesn't really matter, because they can just jump to the next thing.
Yeah, they're going to find... this is a thing that so for Magic the Gathering, there's a content creator called Shivambat, and I have an interview up on his channel that's going to be up in a couple weeks, where we actually talked about this in relation to religion, where a thing that we see a lot with people who like deconstruct from religion is that they do not know how to then reconstruct. They don't have anything else. So all we end up getting is like, so as an example, you get like the angry atheist who wants to convert you to atheism. And it's literally just them taking all of the habits they had from when they were an evangelical, when they were told to go spread the good word. It's that idea, and they never got a chance to actually, or they never learned how to move away from that idea of let me go spread the good word. Just the good word has changed. Or you get the person who's like a really, I feel like I'm describing at least 3 people when I say this, but you get the person who's like a really terrible, abusive husband, father, etc., and they use the Bible as their justification for that. And then later on down the road, they deconvert, but they're still an abusive husband and or father. And at that point, well, they can't hide behind the book anymore for it, because that was never actually the issue. The issue was them. The issue was internal.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it's interesting because like that's something that I say a lot to people who reach out to me who have been further right, is this idea of like, hey, just so you know, you're the same person. You're the same person when you went down that route. You're the same person when you were in that route, and you're the same person now. Because that's something I had to come to terms with too, is like, and it's both comforting and frightening at the same time, that like you can have an entire worldview, have it destroyed, and you are still the same fundamental person when it feels like the entire world around you has changed. I think that's a very sobering and a very frightening experience to a lot of people.
I think for a lot of people, it can make them, and I want your opinion on this, but for a lot of people, I feel like it might make their concept of identity almost subconsciously get terribly, terribly shaken, because not a lot of us have a really good idea of what our sense of self is. A lot of us kind of wake up in the morning, go through the motions, and then when somebody asks us to think deeper about any of that, we don't have a really good way of going around that. I think, have you ever seen Evangelion?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm a huge anime guy.
Okay,
yeah.
so the therapy scene with Shinji and Evangelion, where everybody is basically saying like, hey, you've spent this entire story doing what everybody told you to do. Maybe you should take a little bit of time to self-actualize. Maybe you should take a little bit of time to talk to you inside of you for just a fucking minute and figure out who you are. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people may struggle with doing that part of looking internally and figuring out like what are the actual building blocks of their identity.
Yeah. I think the thing is too, identity, like I'm a big believer that identity is not internal, it's externally imposed.
So that's interesting. Could you elaborate on that? Because that's
sure. Like, so here's a good example actually. My entire life, no one has ever thought I was anything other than white.
Okay.
The moment I started speaking against white nationalists, a lot of people started saying I was Jewish And in my politics video, even a lot of leftists were saying I look mixed race.
I don't know
No one
that.
has
I don't know that
ever thought that
afro
in my
looks
life.
kind of Jewish to me.
That's the thing. Well, that's what everyone goes. Or the nose, a big old Scottish nose. Again, they're all like, "Oh, you know, you're Jewish, you're Jewish," and it doesn't bug me. But it's like it was a strange thing to me to suddenly think to myself like, "Oh, do I not look like this super pasty white guy?" Because if you look at my politics video, you can see how I look with shorter hair, and that's how I looked for most of my life. It's a very different look. Like I think when there's an internal experience of self that I think most of us have. But when it comes to an identity, I think that really only exists in the space between you and someone else. Okay. And as a result of that, like the identity is necessarily externally imposed on you because the relationship you have with other things is what your identity is. There's this one guy, Heidegger, who's a Nazi, but he's a philosopher, so it's cool. Who like he had this interesting idea
Things
of
I've had to say
like
about Nietzsche before. I get it.
Yeah. No, Heidegger was not Nietzsche though. He was very on board with the Hitler thing. But his whole thing, he had this really interesting idea of like, what is a river? Because if you live next to a river and you're a fisherman and suddenly one day there's no fish in the river, you get very mad at the river. But the river's still being a river. The river never stopped being a river. The river never changed. There just aren't fish in the river. But to you, the river wasn't a river. It was a source of fish that you called a river. Mm-hmm. And by the same logic, if you have like a water wheel to, turn your millstone, and then the level rises too much and destroys your water wheel, or gets too low and your water wheel doesn't work anymore. Again, the river is still doing its function. It's carrying water from one place to another.
Nothing's truly changed about the river.
But to you, it is a fundamentally different thing now, because to you, it's not giving you this thing that you want. So to me, it's like, and I think this gets to like passing, right? The old joke of like, can logic say the N-word? Like, I think how you look is going to be how people treat you. And then they might find out some extra information and start treating you differently. But that's only going to happen when the extra information is introduced and suddenly you have a new identity. So for me, at least, I think most people don't have a real sense of self for sure. But I think that the bigger issue with identity is that it's not something you can create on your own. It's something you have to create with other people. And if you want to change who you are, the way you do that is by changing your relationships with other people in the world around you, which involves changing yourself. But like, I would like theoretically, I think you could construct a person who could like just lie 24/7, not change who they are, but have a different identity because of the way they're treated by the people around them. Like like reverse philosophical zombie, essentially.
I was about to say this sounds like we're doing the P-zombie thing, where it's for people in chat who may not know, P-zombie is a being that can respond to stimuli in such a way that it is indistinguishable from a person, but it is only ever responding to stimuli. It does not have a sense of self. It is a thing. I guess like a large language model.
LLMs.
Yeah, I was about to say a large language model is sort of a type of P-zombie. It has no self-identity, but from the outside looking in, it looks like it could to somebody who doesn't know what to look for, where to poke and prod. It looks like it's a person to you. That's a P-zombie. So I had not heard the idea that identity, this sort of thing that I've always thought of as an internal process, was more external than that. At least not articulated quite that way, where it's how everybody else sees us. I say that, but now I'm thinking again about the therapy scene in Evangelion, where the exact line is stated, the Shinji that lives in your heart is not the same Shinji that lives in this other person's heart. The Shinji that lives in their heart is not the same Shinji that lives in my heart. That's basically the exact same thing, is your identity is made up of these perspectives that other people have on you, and those perspectives are shaped by your actions, and those actions are shaped by your internal thoughts. But according to you, effectively, the identity is not being shaped by those internal thoughts. It's everything that's downstream from that. Yeah,
and I would say it is largely cultural in a lot of contexts. Like for me, a big thing is like in Rome, obviously in ancient Rome, they didn't have words for gay and straight. They had words for the active partner in a sexual act or the top, and the passive partner in the sexual act or the bottom. And like it wasn't really that big of a deal at certain parts of the empire and certain parts of the empire. Again, Rome is really big and really complicated, and there were a ton of people in it, so it's hard to make like a single declarative statement about everything.
It's more okay to be gay in New York than it is to be in Alabama.
Exactly. But like like they wouldn't have thought of it as gay. Like no one would have said, "Oh, I'm gay." They would have said, "I'm a bottom."
Because that the aspect of their identity that we use now, like I guess because we have a different way of looking at relationships where everything that happens sexually is behind closed doors. So that's information that is unknown to most of us. But we see the person who you go to bed with. We see the person that you're holding hands with. And as a result, like the identity that we ascribe to you is based on the information we can know.
And even think about like the idea of a man who enjoys being pegged by his female wife and the joy of a man who enjoys having sex with his male partner where he is in the receiving position. Like there is a difference between those two things in our mind, but I'm pretty sure we could think of a society that would not necessarily see those two things as different because the focus would be on the experience of the person in the receiving position, not necessarily in the totality of the action. Like, so that is a big thing that changed my idea of identity, because I used to think much like you that it purely was internal, and I have slowly shifted as I've read more into history into going like it gets tricky, because I've had like professors reach out to me and say you shouldn't use terms like gay or bi because the Romans wouldn't have thought of it that way. And my response was always, well, I'm using modern terms because I'm speaking to a modern audience.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, more and more what I'm realizing is, no, I think there's a point to what they're saying, and that you're right. They like those words do paint a certain picture, a certain type of picture that I don't know is necessarily accurate. And I think it's difficult to caveat enough to make it clear. But it's like, that's a big thing that changed for me, where I suddenly realized like me saying gay because I say we'd call them gay today. And then I go, yeah, but that's not what was going on at the time, even though the actions are identical. And like that was a moment where I was sort of like, oh, maybe identity is this like externally constructed thing through culture and not actually an internal experience necessarily.
Because that person from that culture could come in a time machine and be next to you today, describe their lived experiences, and the way that you react to those lived experiences would be very different to somebody who was contemporary to them.
Yeah.
And then
the question is, would they be gay? If I took a Roman from the past and brought them here, are they now gay? Are they like a different identity than what they were in Rome? And I kind of came to the conclusion that I think the answer is yeah.
Okay. I guess that also kind of tracks because like we've had this conversation, not you and I, but like audiences and people on the left have had this conversation about trans people before, about how long trans people have existed in society, even before we had the language to describe them. We've had people who, if we brought them from their society to our society, would have likely been considered trans. I know that a memed on answer for that is usually like Joan of Arc is one where
I don't know about Joan of Arc. Sporus,
right.
I will say. I don't know about Joan of Arc. Though,
right. That's why I said it's sort of a memed on one that's brought up. But like you bring bring one of those historical figures into the modern day, and the words we would use to describe them, we'd use modern words. So we would use somebody who's having that different gendered experience as trans or gender nonconforming or any of these things that wouldn't make any sense to somebody who lived before we coined the term gender.
Yeah.
No, I can definitely get that. That makes sense because that's in line with other conversations that have been had about other things in areas around me.
Well, and I think it also like it's really interesting because one of the first things I had to think about was like if I got on a plane and I go to a culture where like there's something where I have a piece of my identity that is different in a different culture. So like my sister lived in China for a number of years and I visited her once. and she's also a redhead. And she pointed out to me, she was like, in China, there isn't a difference between red hair and blonde hair. To them, that's the same category. Like black and brown hair is like one thing.
Oh,
and then,
so like the lived experience where here somebody would, they'll make a joke about you not having a soul.
But also I'm a ginger. I'm a distinct thing that's a smaller minority than blonde people. Like I wrote an essay to get into one of my colleges that how I'd bring diversity to the college was I was a ginger.
But
and
you
there
would
isn't
not
enough
be
ginger
considered
representation.
diverse when you go to China. You would be considered at most a subcategory of blonde.
And so then the question is, do I stop being a ginger when I get off the plane in China? And I think, again, what I sat with for a long time was I was like, well, yeah, because if I just run around China screaming, I'm ginger, like I'm not actually going to be able to have the experience that I would have in America of having this hair color. And the experience I will have in China is going to be a lot more similar to someone who has blonde hair. And at that point, like, the way we often talk about identities in terms of lived experience. And if my lived experience isn't necessarily going to match with this idea in my head of what this lived experience should, quote unquote, be, then who's defining my identity? And that's kind of, it's not, I will say this, as much as I'm saying this like I'm being very authoritative, I'm more than happy to be argued off this position. If you can see any flaws in it, by all means, please feel free to present them.
The flaw
but this is just some thinking I've been doing.
The flaw that I would see would be, let's take somebody who's gender nonconforming. I'll pick one out of the hat. Let's say somebody's gender fluid. So their lived experience is waking up one day, looking in the mirror and going, okay, my figure feels more feminine. And then maybe tomorrow waking up in the mirror and saying my figure feels more masculine. Neither of these are necessarily true or false, but they are what's going on in the person's mind. And that person's experience of being inside a college, usually a more liberal institution, a place where people are going to respect that a little more, their lived experience is correcting somebody when they say the wrong gender for that day and them having that respected by somebody at the college. And then the minute that they go to, say, a construction work site, there's some colorful slurs that will be thrown their way instead.
Sure.
And now their lived experience is going to be one where the outside response to their position will always be opposition.
Yeah.
Is that person no longer gender nonconforming, or has that lived experience functionally changed merely because the society around them is responding to it differently? I would say probably not. Like, their internal idea of who they are is still different than what society would want. It's still what it is. That hasn't changed, but what has changed is the outside stimuli. But their internal identity is still consistent.
But what I would say in terms of that specific example would be that them correcting someone on the college campus, that's still an experience based on the way they feel when they wake up in the morning, the way they feel living their life. And being called slurs, that's still based on, I don't want to say like their actions or their behaviors, but like their internal experience of self in that moment.
It's a response to their actions, because correcting somebody is an action.
Yeah. And there's still a core of the experience that's based around that. Whereas if I go to China, I'm not going to have the experience of having red hair that I will have in the US, where I feel like people do expect me to be funny or something like that, or think of me as very angry or a bully or something like that. These cultural kind of tropes we've built. And my sort of counter thought to the gender nonconforming person is, if they wake up and they say, my body feels more feminine today, and then I put them in a culture where their idea of a feminine body is that culture's idea of a masculine body, what does that mean for them in that moment? Do they actually feel more masculine that day? Do they feel more feminine? If they walk around and everyone says, you are presenting so masculine today, but internally their experience is that they're presenting as feminine that day, like, where does the identity lie in that, when really both people are saying the exact same thing, they're just using the complete opposite words to mean it?
Yeah, because they're, like, for instance, if somebody's idea, actually a good example of this would be the way that our idea about figures has changed over the years. Once upon a time, the feminine figure was considered quite literally a stick. That was the ideal feminine figure, and then the ideal masculine figure was usually fairly muscly, fairly toned, and if it wasn't, a suit was usually used to provide that same kind of bulk and silhouette, and that was the idea. You had one idea of what a masculine figure is supposed to be, this broad-shouldered, towering person. Your idea of the feminine figure would be the stick. But when you fast forward further, now suddenly the words for somebody who looks more like a stick, oh, that person's very wiry. And now suddenly you're describing either gender, or you might even be just describing a man right now. That's what your description is going to be now. Now, when you think of a womanly body, you're going to think more curvy. You're going to think somebody who has more... This term is far funnier in other contexts, but you think of birthing hips. So, whereas that might not necessarily be the idea of what femininity is when you roll that back. Now, granted, I'm not speaking from an authoritative position here either. This is not my area of expertise. I would actually argue I don't have an area of expertise, except maybe spending too much time on trading card games. Maybe that's But that's like saying that a heroin addict has an area of expertise that involves a spoon. So,
I mean, they probably do know quite a lot about spoons, the right types and all that stuff, which conduct heat well. No, but I do see your point, and I think this is a lot. I mean, identity is necessarily tricky no matter what. You've given me some interesting stuff to think about, but yeah, to me, it's just always so tough to think of like, if I use a word and I mean the same thing, but to you, your instinctive reaction is to dislike the word, not necessarily who's right, but like what's happening in that moment, like between the two of us. If we're using, like, I use a word, like I misgender you, but in my head, I'm not, because that word just happens to mean something different to me. Like, it's an interesting thing that I haven't necessarily been able to figure out an answer to yet. And I think too, to our earlier conversation about the conspiracy theorists, that's where I also think I hate how much everyone these days always just says it's simple, where like we're afraid of complex ideas these days, or like really getting into the weeds on stuff, because what it comes down to is like, look, it's simple. America was white people, and so we should keep it white. It's so simple. I don't understand why anyone doesn't understand this. Like, that kind of stuff I think is dangerous. So
what's funny, I actually have a video where a commenter came into my chat and used that exact vernacular to describe why we should kick out all the brown people in the United States. And I had some fun pushing back on him until I finally went, okay, now we're at the point where you're talking in circles. Once you're talking in circles, you're not interesting to me. Once you're not an interesting plaything, you're banned at that point. Which sounds terrible, but like when you're walking in talking about race realism, I can't think of you as anything other than temporary entertainment. It's how I prevent myself from getting mad.
Well, and like we're building communities. Like I don't ban. I ban liberally to a certain extent, but it's like I don't ban people on ideological basis. But what I do ban people on is like if someone comes into my chat and there's someone who's like, hey, I'm a trans person and I resonated with this, and someone's below them going, kill yourself slur, I'm just like, okay, you're banned, because I just don't want you in my
there's no reason to have that person there.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like it's like, oh man, I gotta have both sides, guys. We gotta give equal time to both sides out here. Yeah.
And what one side is saying that you deserve to die, the other side is saying you shouldn't, and I'm trying to find a way to get in the middle. And I think I found.
What if we just kill half? Maybe that's a
no. You're missing the broader point. It's really simple.
Okay.
Make them all work retail. Then they're dead on the inside.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
See, now we can have our cake and eat it too. They don't have to have a physical death, but when they wake up in the morning, man.
I mean, at the end of the day, spiritual death. I mean, that's forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
That's eternity right there.
Totally.
But yeah, I think it's like I think there's a lot of dangerous ideas online these days around that, where I think a lot of stuff gets pushed by like it's so simple, and it's this idea of like, because I really do think when you're far right, when you're very, very far, you end up with this idea that if everyone had access to the information that I have access to, everyone would agree with me. No one would disagree with me.
That's how I felt when I was a Jones conspiracy theorist.
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
that.
Yeah. And then it's like,
if everybody had my special knowledge.
everyone would agree. And the only people pushing back are people who are paid by the other side. Because if someone demonstrates that they know what you're talking about, but they disagree with you, well, then they're just paid by the other side or something like that. You know what I mean? Like and I think that's how you develop these ideas of a deep state. These ideas of like there's some secret shadow cabal controlling everything behind the scenes and making everyone miserable. Because again, you're stuck in this idea of simplicity, and you can't just deal with the fact that like building a government for 300 million people is really hard, and like convincing people of new ideas, even ideas like healthcare, ideas which the rest of the world seems to deal with quite easily, is hard to do, because it's just convincing people to change their minds is difficult. Like that's something that I hope I can push back on in some capacity, because I think it's so dangerous to just look at everything as simple when the reality is like things are really complicated, and they're complicated by design because that's just how they've been built over time. But like, I don't know, everyone's like anarcho-primitivist these days, I guess.
If we just destroyed society, we could build everything back up perfectly right now. And no, I haven't read Conquest of Bread. I have no idea what's in that fucking book. I sure hope he never said anything about how bad that particular thought process is. That would be awful.
Or the Federalist or actually,
anyway.
here. You might. I'm going to put you on the spot real quick.
Sure, why not?
Do you think democracy is failing right now? Do you think Trump is a failure of democracy?
Do I think Trump is a failure of democracy? I would say he's not a failure of democracy. He's a failure of marketing.
I'd agree with that actually, because I would say a big pet peeve I've had is a bunch of people now saying like democracy doesn't work, when most people don't understand the point of democracy, which is preventing civil wars. That's really literally the whole point, is the mandate of the people. And I think in many ways, Trump is bad and I don't like him. But the fact that when he was elected, we didn't immediately go to war over it, even if maybe we should have, I think is like good in a sense.
That's democracy working. And that is it can be considered a failing of democracy that we do end up getting inept leaders. That is not a failure.
But any system is going to give you that. I mean, like the Roman Empire.
Any system's going to have that problem. There is a content creator who I used to respect until I found out that they were a hardline monarchist. And I sat there going, and why do you think having no say over the government and the rules that dictate your life is a good thing? Do you just like having a parent tell you everything all the time?
You're thinking about it the wrong way, though. If you have a person that you educate from birth to be the perfect leader, and they come from the right genetic stock to be a perfect leader, then you will always have a good leader. That's what monarchists believe. That's where they come from. That's their idea.
Aaron says which YouTuber. So I'm gonna give you a little hint on how social dynamics work. When somebody chooses not to name somebody's name, there's a reason they are doing so. This is one of those situations. I have no reason to create beef with another content creator, but I can simply say an experience I had, and I can get everything I need out of that conversation without the drama that can come with it as well. I have no need for that secondary part. None of that's necessary. But so it's funny is my friend Ocean and I actually had the Monarch conversation as a fun back and forth a couple years ago over at his house. But I would say to expand on the failure of marketing.
Yeah.
I do not think that getting an inept leader is a failure of democracy. It is one of the possible outcomes of democracy. It is simply what can happen. It's a failure of marketing, because the job of a marketing department is to sell you on an idea that you either do not need or you have not thought about. That is what a marketing department's job is to do. We had a marketing department successfully sell half of the country on either their vote not mattering or Donald Trump. We have had.
Well, I don't even know half of the country. I think a few 100,000 people in the right states. I think that's what they were able to sell. That's who they were selling to. Yeah.
That's that one is a different conversation entirely. A conversation that's like. Because then we get to talk about gerrymandering, which is really fun because of all the stuff that's happened with that this year alone.
Yeah. Well, but that doesn't matter as much for the Electoral College. But yes, I still understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. I understand. So
Yeah.
I would say the electoral. Actually, that's another one to hop onto.
Sure.
But give me just a second for the marketing thing.
Okay. Fair enough.
So,
yeah.
because the job of somebody in a marketing department is to sell you on an idea, either not doing something. So here's like an anti-smoking ad. That's a marketing department. A marketing department has tried to sell you on the idea of not smoking, or going and picking up something that you do not need. That's Marlboro trying to sell you on cigarettes.
Sure.
We had marketing departments from multiple sides try to sell us on certain politicians and sell us against certain other politicians, or in some cases, especially from like more independent institutions, sell us on the whole system being so broken that you shouldn't go out and vote at all.
Yes.
And we've certainly seen some of that on both sides of the aisle, and I hate it when I see that on my side, where I get somebody who says, well, don't vote Democrat at all. That will teach them the lesson that they should go further left. And you're just like, all right, I need to talk to you about how the Overton window shifts further right when people are in power.
Well, also, like, we don't have abortion. Like, there's real problems from not doing. Like, people are always like, we should just make sure that like poor black women in Alabama can't get abortions because somehow that'll convince the elites in Washington that they need to like become socialist. Like, I don't know. I hate this idea of like we're just going to keep.
It's accelerationism.
Anyway,
Accelerationism doesn't function very well. Again, Conquest of Bread's a really funny book. Anyway, okay, so I've made that joke twice. I need to contextualize it for the audience. So the TLDR for Conquest of Bread is people are very obsessed with the idea of revolution and very bought into the idea of revolution, and then they don't look at the underlying infrastructure of the thing they are usurping, and they tend to not know how to maintain any of that. And then, as a result, you get 10 years of running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and then you just get somebody else that fills in the power vacuum after you got rid of the last person creating the power vacuum. Like, that was the observation Kropotkin made in Conquest, was if you don't solve the problem of bread, if you don't solve the problem of underlying infrastructure, your revolution does nothing but kill all of the bad people whose names you know.
Yeah.
And now the bad people whose names you don't know come in and take that power afterwards.
And let's not forget, the CIA couldn't do it in South America. Yeah. I don't know why, you think you're going to have a better time of it necessarily.
Taryn says TLDR, tearing a government down is the easy part. Yeah, TLDR,
yes.
Tearing down the government's the easy part. The infrastructure is the hard part. But that's that. We were on the marketing thing. Now we're at the Electoral College was the area we ADHD'd from for a second. So... I actually want to throw that one at you. Do you think there is a solution to the current problems of the Electoral College?
Yes, but I think it's one that I think the difficulty anytime you talk about American policy is you have to come at it from a pragmatic approach of what is actually feasible to get done.
Right.
Like, I think ranked choice voting is probably the easiest way through. But like convincing Americans to engage in ranked choice voting, I think to our marketing department discussion is going to be really, really hard. I think in a number of ways, the biggest problem right now is that the specific type of divide that we are seeing in America, which is very much, I think, like a rural urban divide, is not something that the Electoral College is good at handling. And we've had this, I think Bush was the first one to really run into this problem. I really feel like the solutions would have to be almost like a redrawing of what the states are, which is basically impossible altogether. And I think the popular vote also gets really, really tricky really, really fast. Again, like my ideal is ranked choice voting. I think that's the way you fix it. I think you give people the ability to select multiple candidates. You're able to eliminate the lowest and kind of trickle it through so that it feels like there's more. Now, and we can do that in like Alaska, I think, has that.
Now suddenly we don't have wasted votes. We just have votes that are weighted disproportionately.
Yeah. And like, I think that's a good solution. The problem is I just don't know how. I think there are a lot of Americans who like the Electoral College because the founding fathers came up with it. I really do think, and I don't know how you overcome that necessarily.
So there's a sort of like originalism there.
Yeah.
That's like, also dangerous when the Supreme Court does it, as we've seen.
Yes. No, because I think the cool part about America is that we specifically built it as a system that can change. Like we specifically were like, oh, we want to make sure we can put amendments in the Constitution. And what I think is super cool is we don't have a system for taking amendments out of the Constitution. So like when we ban liquor, that's one amendment, and we have a second amendment nullifying that earlier amendment because there was no way to take the amendment out of the Constitution. Like I think that's actually a really cool thing that we have in America. And weirdly though, we hate doing it. As much as like we built a system for it, everyone's like, no, the founding fathers designed a perfect system and we should never touch it. We should never modify it because they were these like once in all of life geniuses and no one will ever come close to their like intellectual prowess. When I think again, they knew things would change and we need to have changes for it. But it's just people don't like change. Yeah, I don't know.
Change is scary. And I can definitely see that being a good not a good reason why people would not want to go down that route of changing things, but that is a valid reason at population scale why it's hard to do that. Is you have to get people on board with the thing. Like it's like so like for me politically, I'm a socialist, and explaining socialism to somebody usually requires me trying to find a way like how can I work this into your language in a way where this idea that you are primed to hate is not communicated in a way that you're going to immediately step away from. Because I think I'm seeing that a lot with the ranked choice voting right now, where it's seen as like so complicated, and why wouldn't you just want the best two candidates? Why wouldn't you want just the best out of those two? We even saw Trump try to do that with New York, saying like everybody should drop out of the race except like Mamdani and his opponent. That should be all that's left in the race. And then we see what happens there. Like you don't see that as a deliberate way to manipulate a system,
right?
Like that's really weird. I don't like
this from the guy who said he'd run as an independent if he didn't get the Republican primary nomination. Like,
it's definitely weird seeing a lot of the reactions to that. But at the same time, it makes sense. People are adverse to change. I can definitely see that argument, and I don't want to agree with it. It feels way too simple, but it also feels like it explains most of the problems. Because again, when I've tried to explain, like, here's my political position on socialism, I think that working in a factory means that you have more knowledge of how that factory operates than most of the people who are going to be at the tippy top who bought that factory. They didn't work any of those machines. They don't know how those work. So why are they the ones getting more pay? And moreover, shouldn't the people who are working these machines be the ones to decide who's in charge of them at that point? Like, that's how we do democracy in politics. Why wouldn't we want to transfer that to how a business operates? We choose the best from among us instead of having a person assigned from the top to be above us. Why would we want this other system instead of this one?
Well, this might be, if you don't want to go down this route, let me know, because I'm happy to pump the brakes. But because I find it very difficult to describe myself politically because I hold a lot of very strange positions.
Okay.
There are some socialist positions that I really like, and certainly like more workers' rights, unions. I love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I usually still describe myself as a capitalist, not because necessarily I'm in love with capitalism like as itself, but because I think it's an efficient way to ensure that the economy keeps moving.
Okay.
Just because of like the underlying, like if you're going to take a centrally planned economy, like, you know what, fuck it. My new video's on the moon landing. Basically like the idea of the space race, which shocked everyone, was how can the Soviets beat us at the space race? We are the capitalist, like winners of the world. But the reality is, of course they're going to beat us at the space race. They can put more money into the space race than the US government could possibly hope to, because in a capitalist system, the government doesn't have quite as much control over the flow of currency within an economy. And so it's not strange that they should beat us at the space race initially and for like 99% of it. But then, hey, we got the last 1%. So guess who won? But like, that's, I think, for me, capitalism is like a system of organizing capital, at which point I then think you say, okay, within that organizational structure, what are the things we can do to disincentivize bad practices? What are the things we can do to protect workers and incentivize protection of workers, incentivize caring for the environment, and, you know, like basically raising taxes to kind of support some sort of welfare state, while at the same time still allowing the capital to get to where it needs to get to. Mm-hmm. Because obviously one of the big things that centrally planning struggles with is very quick changes, very rapid problematic chain. If something comes up like
So-
immediately, that's a huge disaster. It's harder to get the money there as quickly.
I think my pushback to that would be that socialism is not a centrally planned economy. Like
No. Sorry, go ahead. But yeah,
right.
sorry.
So
Yeah,
like the caveat with socialism is that you, instead of having capital organized from top down, you have it organized more from bottom up. And the way that takes shape, obviously unions are one way that takes shape. Now we have more bargaining power from the bottom. We've swelled the power of the bottom. It's easier for us to negotiate better pay and stuff like that. But the natural next step from that would be guilds. And we have a couple of guilds that are branches from unions right now in the United States. But
Sure.
This is why I've never described myself as a syndicalist, but I have a friend who has a master's in economics who describes me as a syndicalist, and he's the expert, and I don't know how I want to fight against that. But
Sure.
it's like my idea is that you still have that, I don't want to say disorganized economy, but you have organic. That's probably the better way to put it. You have that more organic economy like you do in capitalism, but your power structures are divvied out from the bottom up. They are democratized more so than they are, I'm the guy who has the most money on the board, therefore I'm the guy who has the most deciding power. I'm not really a fan of centrally planned economies either. There are too many things that I personally enjoy that probably would not come to be under a fully centrally planned economy. I like video games. I like
Hey, Tetris came out of the Soviet Union. All right, they got some stuff.
Technically speaking, yes. Like I like video games. I like card games. I like these things that are usually from a lot of like independent studios making things. I don't want a fully centralized economy, but I also do not want the top-down power structure that we've classically seen and the ways that abuses can happen with it.
Yeah, first off, I will say, I understand socialism isn't necessarily central planning. I was more meaning that in terms of the space race and talking about the problems.
That's entirely fair.
Yeah. So I do apologize for that off the top, as I didn't mean to categorize you that way. But my question to you is just going to be, because we may actually then agree a lot more than you think. Like, within our current system of capitalism, I could form a co-op if I wanted to. My sister belongs to a co-op grocery store in New York. Like,
yes.
Is a co-op sort of what you're thinking of, or is it something a little bit stricter than that?
So right now, you can form a co-op, and that co-op has to compete with, let's say that you're doing a co-op grocery store, as an example. Your co-op grocery store has to compete with Walmart. Now, the problem that you run into is that your Walmart can operate at a loss against you for decades and still have money in its pocket while it cannibalizes your business by operating at a loss against you. I think co-ops are a wonderful thing, and they are a great way to fight against the aspects of capitalism that you don't like. The problem is, in order to properly fight against them, you need co-ops at a scale that we simply don't have. You need unions at a scale that we simply don't have. When you try to unionize a Walmart, what do? Historically, they take the Walmart down. It ceases existing. All of the jobs cease existing. Now the conversation's about union stuff happening. So am I thinking something more strict than co-ops? Technically, because my problem is co-ops can't be a solution to this in and of themselves when they are having to compete with a business model that can operate at a loss. Tech industry has a lot of the same problem. If you're familiar with how venture capital works in tech, where, like, for instance, OpenAI spends $100 billion a year on their software. They generate $12 billion a year in revenue, and they are able to do that for multiple years because they have that investment capital. I don't think that's okay. I really don't think that that's an okay system in and of itself, especially if you're trying to compete against that. Because if you operate a co-op at a loss for 2 or 3 years, everybody has lost their job and they have had to go to work somewhere else. And likely they're going to have to go work at that Walmart because that's where their skills are going to be. That's where they're going to get hired. Now, suddenly that Walmart has swelled themselves.
Yeah, I just quickly though, because I more just meant it as a clarifying question.
Okay.
Like, would you consider a co-op in a vacuum or in a world of purely other co-ops to be sort of your, I'm not even going to say ideal, but like closer to what you would want as the structure of a business?
I would rather it be closer to a co-op, yes.
Okay.
Where
Yeah.
a business is, for context, because I want to make sure we're using the word the same way, and of course for audience as well. So a business that's owned and operated by its employees.
Yes.
They're not just
varying degrees within that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not just the members of the business, but they are in some form or fashion its owners.
Right. So because that's interesting, because Costco is usually what I bring up, because like that to me is an interesting idea where it's like co-ops, one of the main ways that you contribute as a part owner of the business is that you do work for the business in some capacity. You are a worker in addition to an owner. And my question would be, because like as a Catholic, there's a little bit of a history, you may have heard of it, of buying a ticket to get into heaven.
Yes, I am very familiar.
For just a little bit. We did it for a little bit, just a little bit. Don't worry about it.
Tiny bit,
But there is an argument where that kind of did make sense at the time, because if you give a bunch of money to the church and the church can like use that money to spread the word of God. Like there's an argument that like you giving the church $1 million is more than you could ever do as an individual. I think it's good that we moved away from that, but like that was the argument at the time.
It's the concept of indulgences, yes.
Right. So I guess for me, I think, because I don't necessarily have an issue with the system you're describing, except for the fact that you're saying, because it sounds like you're basically saying you'd ban private investment in businesses. Is that essentially what you'd be going for? I'm also not trying to like lock you. I'm not trying to like
entirely
lock
fine.
You into some position.
I also
that
feel
I
like
trap you in or something.
I also feel like if I'm unable to answer that question, then maybe I need a different job at
Fair
this
enough.
point.
But also, if at any point I ask a question and you give me an answer, and then 5 minutes into the conversation you realize the words I was using didn't mean what you understood them to mean,
okay,
totally fine to change your answer. I'm never going to like hold you to something and be like, but you said.
In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to ban private investment because nobody would have enough capital in order to engage in that private investment to begin with. The material conditions required for somebody to be able to have enough income to usurp a business would simply not be a thing that they had. So like right now, you have an Elon Musk who's able to just say, I want to buy Twitter, and he can just do that. I think that the material conditions that allowed an Elon Musk to happen in the first place would be what I would want to stop. Would that necessarily mean you'd have to ban that use of that type of use of that money? Very likely, but this actually kind of brings us a little bit back to the conversation in the beginning of the interview, where it was at what point in the pipeline can you stop somebody who's going down that like right-wing conspiracy rabbit hole? And your response was, well, the best way to stop them is before they start posting the memes. It's when they start internalizing them. For me, the best way to stop that is not to stop the private investment. By that point, I believe it has become too late. I believe the point where someone was able to amass that capital, that's where you have to stop it.
So I guess, though, in that sense, now I feel like a dick, because I just was like, you can change your answer. I'm not going to hold you to something. And now I'm going to ask you a question about something you told me earlier.
That's entirely
within the sense
fine,
of, like,
though.
Having a messy economic, I've never done like an online political debate before, so I don't want to be a dick. That's really all I'm trying to think here.
We're also not even really having a debate.
That's true too.
We're having a conversation as complete equals here.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think, or to my point rather, earlier when you said you were still fine with the central economy, or not central, but like the main economy being messy and a little bit more capitalist in the sense of the free flow of cash in order to get to sectors where it's needed as quickly as possible. How would you be able to do that without private investment being a part of that system necessarily?
So for that one, I wish I could give you a more solid answer.
Fair enough.
Honestly,
fair enough.
So in my mind, the best way that I could see it operating would be people being parts of various guilds, and the guild collectively would have that capital with a treasurer that is able to direct that capital towards what they need. So if the guild decides, for instance, let's say that we have a guild that's based around computers, so they know they need a certain amount of silicon in order to develop more chips so that they can get more computers sent out, or they just got a large contract from the US because we're in the middle of the space race or something.
Sure,
who knows?
Sure.
That guild collectively would have the capital to say, well, we need to open up another mine, or we need to do something that requires a major investment. The collective group has a treasury that has that money that can do that. Now, does that mean that it can be open for abuse? But absolutely. You've got humans in a system.
Sure.
They are going to be able to do abuse if they want. But it's not that money would not exist. It's that the hands that are holding that money are collective hands, as opposed to a singular person. I guess the best way to take it out of Fantasyland and move it into reality is if the United States government decides that it wants to take 300 billion taxpayer dollars to do a project, it can, but there are theoretically checks and balances that it has to go through in order to make that decision. Congress has to be able to be the purveyor of the wallet. If Elon Musk decides he wants to throw $300 billion at something, he just can. And I think that's where my concrete brick is right there, is that collective bargaining power, not necessarily being in the hands of the government, but being in the hands of guilds, is where I would want that money to be able to go. The capital wouldn't cease existing, but the method of its holding and exchanging of hands would change.
Well, so let me say, I think actually, because this is one of the things I run into a lot when I speak to socialists.
Yeah.
I actually think you and I very much agree on the end goal. Because I think if I were to say to you, I think money has too much power politically these days,
yeah,
I think you'd agree with me.
That's an easy thing to agree on.
And coming up with a way socially to lessen the power that large amounts of capital have to influence politics, I think necessarily involves lessening the influence large amounts of capital can have on business, because business influences politics, whether you're talking capitalism, socialism, whatever. Industry is able to shape. I've actually done lobbying before, so not lobbying on the, that's cool.
Let me clarify, not lobbying on the part of a business, but volunteer lobbying for Equality Georgia. There was
you could just say BlackRock, it's fine, no one cares anymore.
But there was a bill that was coming through here that I had disagreements with. It was a Narcon bill that also had a ban on trans healthcare woven into the bill. So I caught wind that Equality Georgia was going to be lobbying against it. That's very different. Would be lobbying against that at the Capitol. And I went, I've never done lobbying before. Fuck it. I'm going to go do that. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to figure it out. So if you've ever done that before, where you're sitting behind like the rope line and hearing everybody talk to the politicians, you get to catch wind of the different interest groups and what they're saying to the politicians, because they are not always quiet. They are having those conversations many times very, very loudly. Honestly, a fun experience for anybody in the audience. If you haven't done before, go when you know that your not your city, because this doesn't happen at the city level. When you know that your state has its state level Congress in session, go there when it's in session. And don't even try to talk to any politicians. Just sit there in a suit and listen. Look like you belong there and just pay attention to the conversations happening around you. It's kind of fascinating how these things sound. Anyway, that's a little experience there. But you were saying we would agree more than disagree on the money and politics thing. Where is the road you're trying to walk down for that?
Well, so what I was going to say is, I think a lot of times part of why I consider myself more on the left and why I like socialists a lot more than, I don't know, minarchism. I mean, minarchism isn't really the counter to socialism, but whatever you'd consider that to be on the right. Libertarian, I guess.
Laissez-faire capitalism versus
laissez-faire capitalism. Yeah, that's probably a good one.
That's probably the one I would go with, honestly. Because we technically don't even have that here.
Yeah, it's very true.
We have regulations.
Especially not these days. Yeah, especially not these days. But is that like, I think the main thing that we'd probably disagree on is just the method to get there. And I think
True.
something that I have been a lot more like open with myself over the years is that like I'm honestly fine to give your method a shot as long as you can get enough people on board. And I'm going to convince enough people to try my method, and you can convince. Yeah, I mean that's it's democracy, that's America.
Hey, welcome,
so it's like
welcome back to the marketing conversation.
Exactly. But even as you're talking, it's like I don't, because again, I think a lot of the problems that I have with socialism are far more pragmatic and far more on the implementation level.
Yeah, like
Whereas
how do we
goals,
make this happen?
Exactly. Whereas I think the end goals of socialism, the things people want to achieve, healthcare, lessening the power of money, increasing the power of workers, increasing the power of collectivism in general. I just believe that we can achieve that under a capitalist system with stronger regulations. Because I think to a certain extent, if I were to say, hey, we still have capitalism, but antitrust laws are now, you can't have a business that's worth more than $100 million or something like that. You have to spin those out into smaller businesses with separate and unrelated CEOs. You can't do like a Mondragon holding company cheating thing like that. Like, I feel like you'd be, I'm not saying that'd be your ideal system by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm saying I feel like if I were to say that, you'd probably, exactly, you'd say it's a step in the right direction.
Whereas,
and so
I think where our methods would differ is that for me, in an ideal world, now granted, I'm going to go ahead and say outright, my version is harder. Your version has actively worked when like FDR has gone in and done like the antitrust bashing. We have historical precedents for that. Mine has less historical precedents, and I'm willing to say that completely outright. But I also recognize, as a person who cannot directly change these policies myself, I do have the liberty to say, hey, my ideal scenario is X. And
sure. Yeah. Which is fine.
For me, I think our lynch is that, not lynch, that's linchpin is where I'm going, not lynch.
I was going to be like, whoa, careful there.
Now we're back to the racism conversation. What's the utility of racism? Yeah. But I think where we have our difference there is that for you, the stopgap can be the government and the things that it has, the powers and levers that it has access to. That's where the stopgap can be. Whereas for me, my ideal scenario would be we have that, and at the same time, we have workers organizing on the bottom. I want both. I want the government.
Well, but I'm also comfortable with that.
Right. And at that point, the only difference we have is where we are throwing our cards for more weight. Yours is more weight on the government side, more chips in there. My chips are more in on the worker side, but ultimately we're throwing at the exact same goal. And these are both goals that can be working in complete congruence with one another, because the government providing more protections for unions, for instance, which I think you're okay with, does not suddenly come up against forming more unions as a problem. Forming more unions actually happens more safely in that world where that government intervention is allowing it to happen in the first place. Because my ideal scenario, because you did mention the how do we get there, I guess I can do with the easy roadmap. I'm just going to say the meme of the day is it's simple. It's simple. It's not simple. But it is, you start with unions on an individual level. The best model for this would be the Starbucks union, where you've got your small 10, 15-person company that is part of a larger franchise with, 50, 100 people. Everybody there becomes a union. You don't need a union for a mom-and-pop company. You don't need a union for the bed and breakfast that's heralded by 3 fucking people. That's not what it's for. But once you have a franchise...
You're talking about an employee limit, not like a family-owned business, like a size limit, like a number of employee limit.
So for me, even a family-owned business, once you get to a certain size, you've moved out of that.
That's what I meant. Yeah, okay, gotcha. That's all. Yeah, just clarifying. Yeah.
So you unionize within a certain limit. My ideal is 25 to 50 as your minimum cutoff there. But you unionize those smaller areas of the economy, and once those areas unionize, you've got your Starbucks that is unionized, and then let's say you've also got a McDonald's that has unionized. I know that sounds really silly, but again, the Starbucks being unionized was also really silly a couple years ago. So You get a
I
couple
don't even think it
McDonald's.
was, but yeah.
You get a couple of McDonald's franchises that are unionized, and you get a couple of your Starbucks franchises that are unionized. After a while, once you've got enough of these franchised fast food companies, as an example, unionized, now you can do what the SAG-AFTRA Guild does, which is take all of these areas that are in the same industry but are not connected financially, and you create an inter-area union between those. That's how you get a guild. Now suddenly you have representation not just from other Starbucks employees when you say have to go on strike against Starbucks. Now suddenly the McDonald's employees down the street are able to be part of your strike. They are able to be part of your collective bargaining power. And now the franchisees who were having to compete with each other are now having to temporarily go, hey, your workers want this, our workers want this, and neither of us have workers right now. While they're doing stuff, we need to have a conversation about how we're going to keep our workers and how to keep them happy. That's the kind of thing that as you can scale it up, you slowly creep towards what my ideal system will, effectively is. Once you get all of those guilds that have that more democratic representation from within, but it very much starts from having those smaller businesses first. That's my roadmap, personally. And I don't think that roadmap butts up against negatively anything that would be in your roadmap.
Probably at a certain size it would, because my big thing eventually, and I will admit this is very late in your timeline, would be the idea of industrial unions, like literally unions that essentially control, like let's say the fast food union got so big that basically if I wanted to open a new fast food restaurant, I essentially had to deal with the union before I could do anything. Because to me that feels restrictive to, again, I think the strength of capitalism, which again is just the organization of capital within an economy. But again, that's such a large union. That's not even like the teachers union.
I also feel like we already have a system to handle that problem, though. So I'd like it. So to give a tiny bit of backstory, I do voice acting on the side as part of my living, and so I've done nothing but indie projects because I don't have enough credits for SAG-AFTRA. For anybody,
SAG sucks, but yeah,
I still would like access to union contracts. And
fair enough. I mean, yeah, their rates are better. I'll give you that. Yeah.
That's my main thing, is that I want access to those contracts because there are a lot of things in the industry that I would like to do that require me to have access to that.
For auditions, yeah.
Yes. So for me, I've only ever done indie projects. I've done small indie projects. I've done a video game that's up on Steam. I was the main character for Overton, which just came out a couple weeks ago, which is fucking cool. So I was able to do all that without being part of the SAG union. And the SAG Guild doesn't have any sway over any of the voice actors that were in Overton. Overton was able to be independently made without SAG stuff. Now, the caveat, obviously, for anybody who's familiar with SAG, is that Molly, the person who was head of the project for Overton, Molly is not able to hire SAG contracted workers to fill in any of her roles without there being either a lot of legal hoops to jump through or what have you. That's the thing with SAG. Once you start getting people from SAG in, those are the workers you have. And there's a lot of agencies that work this way. For anybody who's familiar with the history of Dragon Ball Z, this is why the Ocean Group voice actors are different from the Funimation voice actors, because there is a whole thing about, hey, when you start hiring from Canada, you hire in Canada, and that's where Ocean Group is located. You start running into a lot of those things. But I feel like we already have methods of handling that within even our current system right now, and that independent things are able to be formed just fine. Like if you were to want to start a fast food restaurant, you'd be able to do that without contacting the fast food guild, at least I'd imagine, because we have that with SAG.
But I'm saying to a size limit.
To a size
because
limit.
Because if I were to, that's what I'm saying. That's
right.
where I
so
think
if you succeeded in growing to a certain point, now suddenly it's either dissolve or become part of SAG.
But to your point about the earlier stuff of the co-op competing with Walmart, at that point, you are sort of beholden. You don't actually have much negotiating power because you just don't because very easily, the union could just say, we don't want your business for whatever reason. It could be the way you treat your employees, which I would stand behind the union on,
Yeah.
but it could be for some other reason as well, like you don't play well with this other business or something like that, which is a thing that sometimes happens with unions. And that's where, mostly with government unions, though, to be completely fair, but like I said, it's a minor point, and the size of the union would be bigger than anything we currently have to where I would even bring up that objection. It's interesting, though, because you approach unions from the talent side of things, whereas my whole career, I've worked in live entertainment as crew. I'm what's known as a technical director. So I run the video switcher, which is if you're ever watching a sporting event, just for the chat, and you see it cut from the wide shot to a picture of a player's face, someone's pushing a button to make that happen. That person is me. Basically, anything you see on the screen is the result of me pushing a button to make sure you can see it on the screen. I also usually am what's known as the crew chief, and if they don't have enough money, I'm also the director.
As an example, for anybody who may need a visual example, if I press this button right now, you no longer can see Portable Orange. I've just done
that would be
job.
TDing. That is TDing. Yeah.
I have a Stream Deck to do stuff like that. It's nowhere near to the same scale. It is just right.
But I mean, I've worked on small projects. Man, I worked for Disney one time on essentially OBS. It wasn't OBS. It was this different thing called Wirecast. Yeah. But it was basically like a digital interface where I was just clicking, go to this scene. And I remember sitting there going like, Disney, you guys could just do OBS and save so much money, but I wasn't going to tell them that.
But that is interesting that we're both coming from two different sides of that industry. Now, granted, mine's from a lot less experience. I've only done voice acting work, one, on the indie side, and two, I think I've probably only done maybe 8 or 9 projects total, which is not a lot. It's more than most people, but it's not a lot.
It's impressive, like, because again, you start small in entertainment always.
Yeah.
And I think because I know a few SAG voice actors, just because a lot of them moonlight as crew, because when you do get your SAG card, one of the tough things is now suddenly it's a lot harder to do, well, to a certain extent, smaller like you can still do an indie project if you're not getting paid much at all. SAG won't care. But if you were going to be the main character for Overton or something like that, SAG might care about something.
They're going to come in and say, you have to do industry rate.
Exactly.
This is what you have to do.
Well, and then that can kind of screw up the project as a whole at that point, because then it can become, well, now that we're having to do this and we already need to hire a coordinator now, it almost makes sense to just make the whole thing SAG, which is going to add, X $1,000 to the project, blah, blah, blah. And what they say is like getting SAG is tough. And then the tough thing is then it's like you almost have to start over a bit, because a lot of your older contacts in the indie space that got you into SAG now aren't able to necessarily like support you as much.
Your pipeline now has to be completely refreshed.
Exactly. Whereas for my side of things, for crew, it is so common to work union jobs, to work non-union jobs, because the unions, Yahtzee, IATSE, not Yahtzee like the game, but it's pronounced the same way. That union is a lot more okay with you taking gigs here and there, because they kind of understand crew in the gig economy. And so it's interesting because like the union that I belonged past tense to, because I didn't pay dues the past couple of years, that was something that at the time was more of a hindrance for me in some cases, because if I could get like a really cool opportunity, like I worked E3 one year, I worked at the Nintendo Treehouse in 2019. Yeah, which was the last year Nintendo was at E3. It was really cool. And Silk Song was there that year, so I got to play the demo way before everyone else got to play it. And like I got to build out their stuff, and it was really cool. But I remember being terrified that whole week that Yahtzee would ever find out I was working for them, because it was technically a non-union gig. And I just wanted to do it because I was like, it's E3. I want to work E3. But it like suddenly complicated things where I was like, if they find out, I'm in so much trouble. And it was fine. I managed to do it under the table and it was fine. But it's like that kind of stuff, I think, is some of the trickier side of once you're in the union, where when you're on the outside, and again, I can only speak from crew. I don't know the talent side as much, but like on the crew side, unions are seen as like, really, it's just the healthcare. That's the only reason most crew people get on the unions, is like the healthcare is just worth every penny that you pay for it. And other than that, it's not as important.
Fair. Well, I think on that note, we are at about 2 hours, and I think I've probably eaten up plenty of your time at that point.
No, I appreciate it. It was a fun conversation, honestly. It was.
We've ran the gamut from history of your channel to how do you navigate ideologies, to a tiny mini debate about how we would organize an economy, to, hey, holy shit, we kind of have similar areas of an industry that we've both done a level of work in.
Yeah.
You certainly got a more impressive resume than I do in there. I will say that.
I don't know about that, but it was fun. You know, it paid the bills. It is what it is. But yeah, no, it was fun. Thanks for having me on. Seriously, I've been wanting to. I've had a few people reach out about conversations. Usually they want to do debates, but then the moment I respond to them, they suddenly get scared and don't want to do it. So I appreciate you having me on and having the chat. Honestly, it was a lot of fun.
That feels weird to me because, like, I said in the video going over your video, hey, if you ever want to have a chat, I'd love to have a chat about this.
Which is why I reached out, because as soon as
you reached out to me, I'm just like, holy shit, we get to do this. I love this. This is the thing that I enjoy.
This is so much fun.
And
we didn't even talk Seventh Tower, which is, the whole reason we were gonna have this conversation. And then,
damn it! Well, maybe it would be a good idea for one of us to slice our palms and get some blood going, so that we know for a fact that it's gonna happen later.
There you go.
Which is the thing that happens. I didn't know where you were going there. It's the blood oath they do in Seventh Tower.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I told it. Yeah, it's been so long since I've read those.
Because remember,
it's like the walruses. Yeah.
Tal falls off the tower. He ends up with the Viking girl. Viking girl says, "Here's how we do things here," and he's just like, "That's so barbaric for my noble blood."
And then I also found it weird how in the book he just forces her to do the shadow thing. It's this weird colonialist rape thing where it's like, oh, let's just be like, oh, I'm gonna force you to get this creature that is anathema to all your beliefs, and then just tell you it's fine, and then at the end it is fine, and it's just sort of like, oh, okay, I guess that's a good lesson to teach kids.
So I need to go and reread that series personally. It is not my favorite series from that author. My favorite book from that author. Because my favorite book from that author.
I don't know that I've read any other Garth Nix. Yeah.
Really? So
I had a weird collection of books growing up that was just whatever I found. It wasn't like I went out and sought stuff out. Yeah.
So my favorite one from him is Shade's Children. It's a post-apocalyptic story where there is a group of people that make certain that anytime somebody gets to the age of 14, they are immediately killed. The only exception is women who are actively being used for breeding to keep the human race going. They are allowed an extension up to about 18, and then after that point, they also are killed. They get a small extension for that, so you get a bunch of people in society who are just like, I'm gonna do my best to be a birther, and that's gonna keep me alive longer. To quote Garth himself, all of the dark thoughts that he had when he was writing his other books that he couldn't let into those books because it didn't fit their themes, that's the stuff that he put into Shade's Children. So when I read that book, it's what made me a Nix fan. It's what made me go and read his Necromancer series, his Seventh Tower series, and then his series called Keys to the Kingdom. But when I reread Keys to the Kingdom as an adult, I didn't like it anywhere near as much afterwards. So my opinion on Seventh Tower may change if I went back and reread it. I don't know. It's not currently on my reading or rereading list right now.
Yeah, no, I haven't read it again, probably because I was one of those kids where I grew up in a house with 100 books, and I read all of them 5 times by the time I'd gone off to college, because it was just, that's all you had. Yeah. I had 12 video games growing up, and I played all of them 6 times a piece.
That was how I was as well. It's why even as an adult, I find myself replaying games a lot, because we didn't have the money for me to get a lot of newer games. So I was just like, this is my 15th time on Banjo-Kazooie, and I feel fine.
I never played Kazooie. I only ever had Tooie. So I played Banjo-Tooie, but I've never played the original. It's
And I think Kazooie's a better game, personally, between the two of them. I
also didn't get half the jokes because
they're from Kazooie.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's humor that is lifted from Kazooie or is lifted from other Rare franchises. That's a thing Rare used to do a lot back then. Is they'd be like, if you've played Jet Force Gemini, you'll get this joke in Banjo-Kazooie, and you're like, my parents couldn't afford that video game.
Well, anyway, it was great talking to you, sir. Genuinely.
I think it was a good conversation. I definitely would like to have you on again at some point to talk other things as well. So,
yeah.
Hell yeah. Actually, you know what? I will leave you with one question. Are there any multiplayer video games that you actively play right now?
Multiplayer? Chess. No. Really, I played Hearthstone for a long time. I was really good because much like you, I like card games. I grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And like building a deck and an engine, and like I always do homebrew, off-meta, weird stuff.
I have a dual disc hanging up behind me. I know.
Hell yeah. But like, yeah, and it's funny too because YouTube only took off for me in the last like 3 months. I just haven't played like games since then. And after I quit League of Legends, I was just like, I can't do multiplayer. I get too angry. Yeah, not really. Honestly, Hearthstone is probably the closest thing that I could count, and that barely counts, honestly.
I mean, I'd count Hearthstone. It's a game, and it does have a multiplayer component where somebody,
and it sucks.
Where somebody adds you as a friend after you finish a game with them on ranked ladder to call you slurs. That's a multiplayer component of that game.
You're right. I feel like you need that. Without that, can you really call yourself a multiplayer game? That's the real question.
It's why I don't like Magic the Gathering Arena a lot. I love Magic as a card game, but it doesn't have communication between the people who are playing, so it's no different than playing against a really smart bot.
I miss card shops. I feel like they're still out there, obviously, but it's like where I live now, it's like there aren't really any around me, and I'm always just like, damn, I just want a card shop I can go to and like just hang out with a bunch of the other people and smell those smells that you don't smell anywhere outside of a card shop. And it's like, yeah.
Jesus.
I remember my dad picked. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I remember my dad picked my friends and I up one time from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And he was like, have you not showered in a couple days? I was like, no, I have. It's just the stink of the place has stuck to me as I left.
I'm at the card shop now, and you don't understand. When that last person farted, it coalesced with about 100 other ones that have just hung in the air, and the smells on me. It's like hanging around a smoker, only worse.
Yeah, it's saturated. It's like rain. It's like suddenly it just hit too much of a density and it started raining farts.
Like, man, does it smell wet in here to anyone else? Thank you very much for hopping on. I'm gonna go use the restroom.
Yeah, of course. All right, have a good one.
See ya. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.